Been coming here for probably 2 or 3 years now, and this is the first time I've ever seen it like this.
Water levels dropped away from the shore, a flowing stream down to a trickle.
This whole bay area here is completely covered, and there is no mud. You wouldn't be able to see any mud.
Imagine a lake losing nearly 90% of its water in a single day. What does that signal for the communities and industries that depend on it? This is not just about a vanished body of water. It's a collision between environmental collapse and human choices that few expected. In Texas, a critical reservoir that once promised water security has plummeted to historic lows. Behind this dramatic drop lies a tangled story of booming industry, costly plans abandoned, and a city scrambling to keep its taps running while battling drought and legal battles. The sudden lake collapse. Lake Corpus Christi, a vital reservoir supplying water to nearly 500,000 people, experienced an almost unimaginable drop, losing 89% of its capacity in just 24 hours. Such a drastic fall in water level is unprecedented for a lake that has supported this region for decades. This rapid collapse sent shockwaves across the Texas Gulf Coast, immediately threatening households, businesses, and industries that rely on its steady supply. At only 9.8% capacity, the lake now resembles a shadow of its former self, exposing the fragility of a system previously thought secure. This wasn't a slow decline felt over months or years. The lake bottom was suddenly revealed, leaving communities stunned and unprepared. The severity of this drop has forced urgent questions about what brought the lake to its knees so quickly, and whether this crisis was avoidable. While the visible disappearance of water is shocking on its own, the real trouble lies beneath these surface numbers. The drying lake is a symptom of a deeper, systemic failure that has been quietly unfolding out of sight. Many residents have reported cracks appearing in the ground and foundations shifting as the soil loses moisture from years of insufficient rainfall. Experts warn these effects will only worsen if the drought continues, threatening infrastructure and homes. Yet, despite these signs, city officials have urged calm, signaling a disconnect between the crisis and public assurances. The tension between what the water levels reveal and what leaders say hints at conflicts that have yet to be fully exposed. The sudden lake drop is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader watershed collapse. Nearby reservoirs, including Choke Canyon, are down to 8.3% capacity.
This is a situation at Choke Canyon. What I saw was a realization of how dire the situation is,
compounding the crisis for Western water users. Together, these reservoirs feed a network of communities and industries that have thrived here for 70 years, but now face the real danger of running dry altogether. Water scarcity in these quantities threatens not only daily life, but the very economy of the region. Amid mounting desperation, City Council members approved $48 million in emergency water projects, efforts that have yet to come to fruition. This sum reflects both the urgency and the uncertainty gripping Corpus Christi. The clock is ticking as officials scramble to execute plans conceived only on paper while the water continues to disappear. Every day without action pushes the community closer to a breaking point few can fully comprehend. At the heart of this crisis is an unsettling question. How did a lake, once projected to safeguard water needs for decades, evaporate so rapidly? The answer cannot be found in drought alone. Instead, it involves layers of policy choices, industrial pressures, and stalled infrastructure that have combined to create a perfect storm. As we delve deeper, the complex narrative of failure and missed opportunities will come into focus. Yet, this lake's collapse is only the opening chapter. It signals a region pushed to the edge by forces both natural and man-made, forces that will play out in the days, months, and years to come. The unfolding story involves not only water tables and reservoirs, but the lives and livelihoods of millions who depend on them. The impact is wide-ranging, from individual homeowners to global energy markets. This sudden and dramatic event lays bare the contradictions of progress and protection. While industry thrived, water resources dwindled, The lake's rapid fall has exposed painful truths about how these competing demands were managed or mismanaged. What follows is a deep dive into the reasons behind this imbalance, revealing forces that no one in charge was willing to confront until now. Transitioning from the shocking collapse of the lake, we must examine the state of the reservoirs supporting the region and the unprecedented lows they have reached. Reservoirs near empty. Aside from Lake Corpus Christi's dire condition, the region's other main reservoirs are also dangerously depleted. Choke Canyon Reservoir, a crucial part of the western water supply, now sits at a mere 8.3% capacity. When combined, these two sources provide just 9.5% of the water that once kept the area thriving for nearly 70 years. This historic low level signals a system stretched past its limits and facing collapse. These reservoirs have served the community since the mid-20th century, designed to hold a buffer against drought and population growth. Yet, they have rarely, if ever, been this empty. The rapid decline in water volume underscores the intensity and duration of the ongoing drought in the Texas Gulf Coast region. It also highlights the growing imbalance between water availability and demand. Over the years, persistent drought conditions have reduced rainfall and contributed to the reservoir's decline. However, drought alone doesn't fully explain the speed and scale of their depletion. Underneath these environmental pressures lie difficult management choices and competing claims that have amplified the crisis. The water once safeguarded here has become a scarce commodity fought over by many. The National Weather Service has issued stark warnings that if the drought continues, the Nueces River feeding this network could dry up completely, cutting off critical surface water supplies. Such a scenario would trigger widespread water emergencies, intensifying hardships for communities that depend on this life source. Without immediate relief, the ripple effects would expand far beyond regional borders. Corpus Christi's City Council recently authorized nearly $50 million for emergency water projects to address the crisis. But these remain largely conceptual at this point. The challenge is not simply the amount of water, but the lack of contingency capacity and the political quarrels that delay execution. Every day, the reservoirs drop further, the harder it becomes to ensure reliable water access for residents and industries alike. These water shortages threaten a city and region that has grown rapidly, especially in the energy and industrial sectors. As demand escalated over the last decade, water management policies struggled to keep pace. Reservoirs that once appeared ample are now strained to breaking, laid bare by relentless drought and human demands. The cost of this imbalance is mounting. The catastrophe is sharpened by the fact that these reservoirs have often been treated as open access by the region's largest industrial users. As surface supplies fall, the pressure to maintain water-dependent operations becomes a source of conflict and legal battles. The scarcity fuels competition that leaves residents and smaller communities vulnerable. Despite the impending crisis, emergency plans remain incomplete and inflexible. Enforcement of mandatory water use reductions has proven difficult to implement, with significant voices exempted from restrictions. This fractured approach further undermines efforts to stabilize reservoir levels. Surface supplies continue to fall, while trust in management erodes. The next chapter reveals how these players have complicated the region's struggle to conserve water in the face of drought. Industrial water consumption. One of the most critical but often overlooked factors in this crisis is the enormous volume of water consumed by industry along the Texas Gulf Coast. Refineries, chemical plants, and massive industrial complexes use far more water than the average resident or household. For Corpus Christi, heavy industry accounts for up to 80% of the region's water supply, placing immense stress on dwindling resources. A striking example is the Gulf Coast Growth Ventures plastics plant, a $10 billion joint venture between ExxonMobil and Saudi Arabia's national oil company. Since beginning operations in 2022, it consumes as much water daily as all the residents of Corpus Christi combined. This plant operates at peak production, pulling roughly 25 million gallons of drinking quality water every day from reservoirs already in decline. The water demands of this plant, alongside others such as Steel Dynamics steel mill, have locked down the lion's share of available water resources. These industrial users are typically exempt from drought restrictions under programs established years ago, allowing them to maintain operations even as residential water use faces strict limitations. This disparity has fueled mounting frustration among citizens who face penalties for simple activities like lawn watering. This exemption policy, created in 2018, allows the largest industrial users to buy their way out of water curtailments for a nominal fee. It effectively prioritizes industrial needs over residential conservation during drought crises. While it keeps factories running at steady production, it sacrifices flexibility in water management and deepens the crisis for everyone else. Meanwhile, the desalination plant, originally intended to replace lost freshwater supplies, has never been constructed. Despite promises dating back nearly a decade, this costly project was cancelled after soaring estimated expenses and public disputes. This failure to deliver an alternate water source has left industrial users relying entirely on the same shrinking reservoirs. The dilemma deepens because many heavy industries cannot simply reduce water usage without risking operational hazards. Refineries and chemical plants require steady water input to avoid overheating and potential dangerous malfunctions. This technical limitation means industrial water use cannot be quickly curtailed in times of emergency, unlike residential consumption. The result is a system where most mandatory water restrictions target residents and small businesses, while large industrial players continue pulling massive volumes. This imbalance puts intense pressure on the rest of the community and the environment. It raises difficult questions about fairness, sustainability, and long-term planning. Industrial water consumption at this scale reveals the conflict at the heart of Corpus Christi's water crisis, balancing economic growth with essential resources. The rapid industrial expansion triggered by the 2015 shale boom fueled prosperity, but also deepened water vulnerability. The drought simply revealed weaknesses that were already built into the system. The mounting pressures from industrial demand add urgency to understanding the lost opportunity represented by the abandoned desalination project. Broken desalination promises. For nearly a decade, Corpus Christi pinned its hopes on a large-scale desalination plant intended to relieve pressure on its dwindling freshwater reservoirs. The City Council approved the project in 2019 with an initial price tag of $140 million. The plant was designed to produce 10 million gallons of drinking water per day.
Said the city has to bring on more than 1 million gallons of water daily to its system by November,
with a planned completion date in 2023. It seemed like a tangible solution to the growing crisis, one that would help balance industrial and residential needs. However, the project quickly escalated beyond its original scope. By 2020, design changes doubled the plant's intended size to meet rising demands, driving costs steadily upward. By January 2024, estimates had jumped to $550 million, and by July 2025, costs had soared to an astonishing $1.2 billion. These ballooning expenses became a major point of contention among city officials and the public. The prospect of footing such a massive bill unsettled taxpayers and leaders alike. The community's patience frayed, culminating in a contentious 12-hour city council meeting marked by heated debate and shouting matches. Against this backdrop, the city council voted to cancel the entire desalination project just 2 months after reaching the billion-dollar figure. Not a single gallon of desalinated water was ever produced, and the city was left without the alternative supply it desperately needed. This cancellation left a gaping hole in the water strategy and intensified the pressure on existing sources. While this desalination plant could have been a lifeline, it became emblematic of mismanagement and missed opportunities. Critics have labeled the cost estimates as wildly inaccurate and the engineering plans incomplete. Encarnacion Serna, a retired chemical plant operations manager who reviewed the proposals, called the endeavor a legacy of imbeciles. Repeated efforts by concerned professionals to communicate these flaws to city officials were met with silence, deepening public frustration. The failed desalination project also highlights the dangerous gamble the city made by guaranteeing sufficient water supplies to new industrial ventures before securing the resources. In 2017, the city sent ExxonMobil a letter promising enough water to support their massive plastics plant, built at a cost of $10 billion. This plant began drawing water in 2022, even though the desalination plant meant to supplement supply never materialized. The gap between promise and delivery widened with every passing year. The expansion of heavy industry created additional requirements which depleted existing water supplies from the diminishing reservoirs. The industrial development of a large steel mill by Steel Dynamics now reserves almost 80% of Corpus Christi's total water resources for industrial operations. Drought conditions restrict operational capacity because this system makes it difficult to manage water resources while the system enforces strict usage rules for residential and small business customers. The city experiences its current water shortage because multiple priorities compete with each other but lack proper distribution of their importance. Corpus Christi has become defenseless because its industrial growth continues while the desalination plant remains closed and no alternative emergency solution exists. The city faces an escalating water emergency because it depends on surface water, which has resulted in reservoirs reaching their lowest historic levels. The water infrastructure system now encounters a supply shortage, which emerged unexpectedly because nobody saw the need for more water provisions until after the situation reached emergency status. The absence of this essential infrastructure development creates doubt about the abilities of Corpus Christi leaders to create effective long-term solutions for their city. How could a project so vital to regional survival be so drastically mismanaged? The desalination plant has been removed from consideration, which means that every water unit extracted now represents the value of a complete decade of water rights. The effects from that failure will continue to develop throughout time until they reach their maximum extent, where legal and political tensions threaten emergency responses and highlight underlying disputes over shared water resources. Where legal and political tensions threaten emergency responses and highlight underlying disputes over shared water resources. Legal and regional tensions. In the midst of a worsening water crisis, Corpus Christi's plan to tap emergency groundwater from the Evangeline Aquifer sparked fierce opposition from nearby communities. This aquifer lies approximately 20 miles from the city, and officials hope to produce 20 million gallons per day by autumn as a backup to shrinking reservoirs. However, the nearby small city of Sinton, which depends on the same aquifer for its residents, filed legal challenges to block Corpus Christi's permits in early 2026. Sinton's mayor framed the legal battle as a fight for local survival, asserting that their town had the same right to protect its water supply as Corpus Christi. This standoff underscores the regional complexities of water politics, where no single city can extract resources without affecting its neighbors. With reservoirs nearing empty and groundwater contentious, every drop feels like a lifeline up for grabs. These legal challenges create dangerous uncertainty around crucial emergency water projects designed to keep the region alive. Without timely access to groundwater, Corpus Christi risks running its reservoirs dry. The court's refusals or delays might inadvertently force the city into crisis mode before alternative supplies come online. This jeopardizes not just local residents, but the broader economic infrastructure that depends on water stability. Compounding the situation, officials from regional water authorities have anonymously acknowledged that the only realistic natural reprieve would be extraordinarily heavy rain, between 20 and 30 inches, the kind only a hurricane could deliver. This frank admission highlights how unlikely natural recovery is in the short term. Time is running out, and the usual sources of relief have never seemed so distant. Amid these challenges, Corpus Christi's emergency water plans show signs of strain beyond legal hurdles. An interim water operations chief admitted the city lacks the capacity to simply turn off water valves to enforce mandatory cuts during a level 1 water emergency. This inability to implement rationing effectively leaves critical decisions hanging in limbo as supplies dwindle. Tensions over industrial water exemption policies add a layer of complexity to enforcement. Refineries and chemical plants, which use the bulk of water, are not subject to the mandatory cuts affecting residents and smaller businesses. These refineries operate continuously, and adjusting their water consumption raises safety risks such as overheating or explosions. This limits flexibility and complicates water management during emergency conditions. The stakes stretch beyond local hardships. Corpus Christi is home to the nation's #1 port for crude oil exports and hosts refineries critical to Texas and U.S. energy markets. A forced shutdown of these refineries due to water shortages could ripple across the country, affecting fuel supplies and economic stability. The potential fallout elevates this local water crisis to a matter of national concern. Meanwhile, the discord between industrial needs, residential survival, and legal constraints illustrates a fractured system unable to adapt quickly. With groundwater permits contested and emergency plans stalled, the region's leadership appears paralyzed in the face of growing threats. This limbo leaves communities vulnerable and the future uncertain. The challenges crossing municipal boundaries and legal arenas hint at even deeper struggles in managing this dwindling resource as the clock ticks down on viable water supplies. Emergency water plans falter. As the crisis deepens, Corpus Christi finds itself struggling not only with dwindling water supplies, but also with the practical challenge of managing what's left. City officials admit they cannot simply shut off water valves to enforce mandatory reductions, revealing a critical gap in emergency preparedness. When a level 1 water emergency is declared, a 25% cut in usage is required across the board. But the mechanisms to achieve that cut have barely been addressed. This lack of a clear, enforceable plan leaves residents and industries alike in a precarious position. Part of the difficulty lies in the nature of the region's main water consumers, refineries and chemical plants built to operate continuously. These industrial operations cannot easily reduce water intake without risking dangerous consequences, such as overheating or even explosions. Their water systems are not designed for rapid shutdowns or intermittent use, making enforcement of conservation measures almost impossible in practice. This technical reality starkly contrasts with the stricter rules placed on residential users who face penalties even for watering lawns. The disparity in treatment between residential customers and industrial giants is a growing source of resentment within the community. Under a program created in 2018, large industrial users could pay a fee of 25 cents per 1,000 gallons to be exempted from curtailments during droughts. This policy effectively allows refineries and chemical plants to buy their way out of restrictions, while residents contend with criminal charges for minor water use violation. The tension underscores a system struggling to balance economic priorities with basic public needs. Emergency water projects approved by City Council with a price tag of nearly $48 million have yet to materialize. The delay in operationalizing these efforts raises questions about the city's capacity to respond in time. Meanwhile, the drought conditions intensify, pushing reservoirs closer to dead pool levels where water becomes inaccessible. The lag between emergency funding and delivery of solutions threatens to make these efforts too little, too late. The backup strategy of Corpus Christi becomes more difficult because the city needs to extract groundwater from the Evangeline Aquifer to achieve a daily capacity of 20 million gallons. The neighboring city of Sinton, which shares the aquifer resource, has created legal obstacles that prevent necessary permits from being obtained to implement this emergency plan. The regional dispute creates an obstacle that prevents access to one of the few remaining solutions which exists before water resources become completely exhausted, because it shows deficiencies in how different areas manage their water resources together. Community leaders offer cautious optimism because they believe that new water projects will start operating soon enough to solve the existing water shortages. The emergency plan needs better transparency and implementation capacity because it currently lacks both essential elements which build trust with the public. The mandatory cuts will create enforcement problems for residents because industrial users will not face restrictions while technical hurdles stop actual progress from happening. The current approach of the city needs to develop better emergency management procedures which will help handle the present crisis that exists. The problem intensifies because critical sectors such as jet fuel production have no emergency response plans. The refineries provide jet fuel to Texas airports and energy markets outside the Texas region, but the government has not confirmed which alternative fuel sources or emergency procedures will be employed. The public officials admit the serious situation, yet their responses provide only general reassurance without presenting specific plans, which increases worries about our system's ability to recover. This fragile situation sets the stage for profound economic and environmental repercussions that will ripple far beyond the immediate water shortage. Economic and environmental fallout. The stakes of Corpus Christi's water crisis extend well beyond dried reservoirs and lawn bans. The city sits at a critical nexus of energy production and export, hosting the nation's #1 port for crude oil shipments. A shutdown of its refineries, forced by water scarcity, would send shock waves through Texas's energy market and potentially ripple across the entire country. This looming threat links local water management failures to global economic stability. Refineries and chemical plants aren't just heavy water users. They are essential cogs in a supply chain that fuels transportation, manufacturing, and critical infrastructure. Interruptions in their operations could cause cascading disruptions in jet fuel supplies to Texas airports and crude oil exports that affect international markets. Even short-term outages have the potential to trigger price spikes and supply shortages reverberating far beyond regional lines. Locally, the economic fallout could be devastating. The shutdown of major industrial facilities would mean massive job losses in a region already vulnerable to economic fluctuations. Ancillary businesses dependent on refinery operations, trucking, maintenance, services would also suffer, potentially leading to widespread unemployment and community distress. The water crisis threatens to unravel decades of economic progress built on reliable industrial output. Environmental consequences loom as well. As reservoir levels drop, soil subsidence triggers ground cracking and shifts in home foundations. This physical damage is already reported in parts of the city, threatening homes and infrastructure. The drying landscape also intensifies wildfire risks and exacerbates the challenges for agriculture and natural ecosystems that rely on consistent water availability. Efforts to mitigate these impacts through emergency water trucking and temporary fixes carry their own costs. These stopgap measures could bankrupt small businesses and low-income households who bear the brunt of rising water prices and scarcity. The social consequences of prolonged shortages risk deepening inequalities and eroding community resilience. The crisis has drawn sharp warnings from experts and officials alike. James Dodson, former director of the Corpus Christi Water Department, called the situation the very worst scenario he has seen in decades, describing it as an economic disaster. Don Roach, with years at the San Patricio Municipal Water District, warned of controlled depression, massive unemployment, and total industrial shutdown if conditions continue deteriorating.
This week, Sid Miller released a statement to bring attention to the looming water crisis in Corpus Christi.
Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller added urgency by labeling Corpus Christi the canary in the coal mine for the entire state. The city's struggles mirror broader vulnerabilities facing Texas amid climate shifts and rapid industrial growth. What happens here could foreshadow crises in other regions if lessons go unheeded. What happens next could define the fate of Corpus Christi for decades to come. The uncertain future. Corpus Christi stands at a crossroads. facing a future where water scarcity could reshape the city and its surroundings in profound ways. The precarious balance between supply and demand grows more fragile daily as reservoirs dwindle and emergency projects stall. Without significant rainfall, estimated at 20 to 30 inches, akin to what a hurricane might bring, the natural recharge these water sources need remains highly unlikely. This grim reality forces residents and officials alike to confront a harsh question. What if the rain does not come? The city manager has warned that a level 1 water emergency requiring mandatory cuts could arrive as soon as November. But some projections suggest that timeline may move up if current conditions persist. Lake Texana, the region's eastern water source supplying the majority of the city, is already showing rapid declines that could lead to output curtailments by mid-April. This narrowing window for action increases the urgency of finding workable solutions before the situation deteriorates further. Efforts to bring emergency groundwater wells online face significant obstacles, especially legal ones. The small city of Sinton's ongoing lawsuit over permits to tap the Evangeline Aquifer threatens to delay or block these last resort water sources. Meanwhile, Corpus Christi's water officials grapple with implementing any meaningful conservation measures, hindered by the exemptions granted to large industrial users. These overlapping challenges expose the complexity of managing shared water resources in a politically and economically charged environment. There is also a growing risk that, should water runs out completely, industrial shutdowns, particularly of refineries vital to the state and national economy, could ripple far beyond Texas. The cost of these shutdowns would not only be economic but social, sparking massive job losses and putting local livelihoods at stake. Attempts to prepare contingency plans for critical fuel and energy supplies remain shrouded in uncertainty, leaving many questions unanswered. Amid all this, the physical land itself is showing signs of stress. The ground around Corpus Christi is cracking due to soil subsidence linked to prolonged drought and depleted water tables. Home foundations are shifting, endangering property and the integrity of essential infrastructure. These tangible effects remind us that the water crisis is not just about scarcity, but about the long-term habitability of the region. The voices of Encarnacion Serna, who worked as a chemical plant manager, convey a desperate message that life in Corpus Christi will soon return to its historical state of 70 years ago, when people needed to carry plastic jugs from their neighbors to obtain basic water needs. The worst water situation experts have ever observed exists according to James Dodson, who describes it as an economic disaster that requires immediate solutions. The warnings display an extreme danger that exists because organizations refuse to perform their required preventive actions. Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller declared Corpus Christi to be a canary in the coal mine, which indicates that this situation will develop into a larger problem that Texas will face when drought conditions combine with industrial water requirements. The region needs to learn from the current situation because climate change will worsen water shortages while population numbers keep rising. The upcoming events will determine whether they establish a model for future response or become a cautionary tale about what will happen to regions that face equivalent dangers. Corpus Christi's water crisis is a stark reminder of the costs of delayed action and conflicting priorities. The lake's rapid collapse reveals urgent challenges that go beyond the environment to touch every aspect of life. If you found this breakdown insightful, please like and subscribe for more in-depth stories on critical issues shaping our world.